Greetings and welcome back to another episode of the Relationship Schools podcast. What's up? Jason Gaddis here, and glad to be here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing and sharing with your friends. This podcast, as you know, is all about helping each other love better, relate to each other better, go deeper with each other, take responsibility for our part of a conflict, work through conflict, set boundaries. So we provide you with a lot of relationship resources that hopefully help you in your life, right? And we are in a very stressful time with racism going on, the death of George Floyd, the pandemic, COVID-19, masks. Am I going to get sick? Am I not going to get sick? Someone died in my family. You know, like we're all going through this together. And thanks for being here as maybe one resource, because you see relationships as a way through this. If we stay connected to each other, if we learn how to collaborate better, these kind of things, you know. All right. In the last episode, I wanted to make sure that I got a few voices of color here on the podcast to help us make sense of this world we live in right now from a Black perspective. Obviously, I can't speak to that. So our guests have been really gracious to educate me as a white man, but hopefully you, wherever you are on the spectrum of race, whatever the color of skin you have, whatever your gender is, however you identify. I just hope that this serves in some way. In this episode, I've got two Black men, Michael Taylor and Jon Walton. I want to say a few words about each. Michael Taylor I met many years ago. He's been on the podcast before. Super optimistic, upbeat guy. And he's into men's work. Him and I were at a men's conference together many years ago. He's written like 8 books. He's got a TV and radio show. He's a father, a husband, and he's just on the planet to help people turn their pain into purpose and inspiration. And then Jon Walton, I met many years ago, and Jon we hired in our company here at the Relationship School to help us learn more equity and practice more equity, more importantly, in our own organization from the inside out. So he led us on a 5-month training to become an equity-based organization. That he also helped us develop scholarships. Weeze helped me start that, and then Jon took it the next step to finish it off. And so now we offer scholarships for people of color currently in our coaches training. So Jon is a senior leader of global teams and projects. He's advanced innovation and inspired pivotal shifts at startups, nonprofits, and Fortune 500 firms worldwide. He's got a passion for engaged, productive teams, and he's held positions at IBM and Oracle. He traveled a lot. That's when I met him. And he knows and understands this equity, diversity landscape quite well. He graduated from Cornell. I got his MBA at the University of Illinois, Chicago. He's a certified Scrum Master. He was a radio host at KGNU, local radio station for a while. And he's a dad of 2 kids. And just a great guy. So I thought I'd bring these 2 awesome men on and see what they had to say, representing some Black voices here at the Relationship School. So give it a listen. And again, notice how, I'm getting an education here. Some of the Relationship School Facebook group community members got to ask some questions here. I threw your questions in, guys. A few of them got answered, so hopefully that was helpful. Okay, stay tuned to the end to your action step. Okay, welcome to the show, Michael Taylor and Jon Walton.
Well, I'm excited to be here, Jason. Again, I want to acknowledge you for bringing this together. I do want to say that despite all the chaos that we're going through right now in the world, as an optimist, I believe what has happened is America's heart has been cracked wide open. And now it's time for some healing. And I believe this conversation can help facilitate that healing. So thank you for this opportunity.
You got it.
Yeah, and I'll second Michael's words there too, Jason. I think it's important to have this conversation and the idea that we've kind of, as Michael said, crack this wound open, to me, is just a tremendous opportunity, right? A tremendous opportunity to have real dialogue and real conversation about what's going on and what's being felt by everyone, not just, for me and Michael as Black men, but also for you as a white man, and what's going on and how do we kind of move forward from here? Because I think that the opportunity is so great that my concern is that we might miss it. So yeah. I'm excited about this conversation.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Again, thanks for being here, taking your time. And just by way of intro, can you guys just give us like a 1-minute sort of who are you, just so people can orient a little bit, and say your first name so people, as they're listening, because they might not be watching this video on YouTube, as they listen, they might start to equate. Okay, that's Michael, that's Jon.
Go, Jon, go.
All right. So I'm Jon Walton, and my work that I pursue right now is largely helping organizations and working with leaders to really help them develop skills to lead and effectively enable multicultural teams. So my work focuses on helping people understand equity and diversity and inclusion issues, but also understanding that in the context of building systems and building policies and organizations that are able to thrive in this multicultural environment. So my focus really in the last probably 4 or 5 years has really gone more towards helping organizations that seek to take the power of multicultural and intercultural teams to the next level. So for me, this conversation is really timely because I think that, as I said before, there's just so much opportunity. So my work right now just feels very relevant, and I'm so happy to be here.
Cool. Thanks.
And for me, I'm Michael Taylor, brand name Coach Michael Taylor. I have been speaking and writing about the changing roles of masculinity in society for the past 25 years. I've written a total of 8 books, 3 of them primarily focused specifically towards Black men. And I have made it my life's work to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. And so I'm an author, motivational speaker, radio and TV show host, who again believes, despite what we're seeing in the media, there's never been a better time to be alive on the planet than right now. Right
on. Cool. Thanks, Michael. Guys, I want to start just the conversation, just getting right into it, around racism. And it's really clear that we're fed up. A lot of us are fed up with racism and white supremacy and sort of white people not getting it and calling the shots. Can you guys, like, if you were to take a crack at, like, what do you think the roots of this problem are? Like white supremacy, racism, like what is the deepest, like, what is going on here?
Well, Jon, you want to take it first?
All right, you can throw me the hard one first. Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious answer is we talk about going back to slavery and to the systems that were created back in those days that are still perpetuated today in our societies. And so to me, when I think about the root or the core of what's going on here, I have to go back to slavery and try to understand that. When I kind of put it in my modern terms in my mind, for me, it really feels like it's largely fear-based, right? It's fear of the unknown, fear of giving up control, fear of sharing power, and a fear that, as I say, you can grow the pie bigger, but I think that there's a lot of concern that we don't know how to grow the pie bigger. So for us to kind of participate in this collective society where there's equality and fairness is scary for some people. And I think that right now, fear is the biggest thing that's kind of holding us back from making progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it is my belief that a society is simply the reflection of the consciousness of its people. And so if we look at society collectively, I think one thing we have to acknowledge, first and foremost, is collectively, as a country, we love violence. Now, why do I say that? Pay attention to the media, and what do we see? We're constantly bombarded with negative images and stories. But why is that? Because the media will only create what people want to watch. So obviously, there's lots of people that want to watch what's being put out there. So if you look at it from that perspective, what the media is putting out and who's watching it and why do they want to watch it, we have to understand that Black people only make up 13% of this country. So surely we aren't driving the media. So the question becomes, how do we get the collective, majority whites, to shift the way they see themselves and us? Well, again, I'm an optimist. And what I see is as we look at the events that are happening right now, for the last 3 or 4 years, I've noticed a trend. For example, white people talking about white privilege. That's kind of a new thing the last 5 years or so. So to me, what that's saying is the consciousness is beginning to shift, because unfortunately it took this tragedy of seeing, Mr. Floyd and how he was killed, I think, to really break open the hearts of everybody. And so if you look at the protest and you see the people of all races coming together because of the pain, it's the feeling that we all experience. And so when we start embracing our humanity and move past this idea of a ethnocentric worldview, meaning that human beings are somehow different because of the color of their skin, as we move past that, which I believe we will, this is simply an opportunity for us to look at the evolutionary process of human beings. I believe human beings are still evolving, and we're evolving in consciousness. And what we're seeing is just a breakdown of the old paradigm that's creating a new paradigm.
Cool. Yeah. I'm with that. I think we are evolving. Like clearly, there's change in the last 100 years. There's big change, and it just seems like there's this undercurrent of racism that is maybe gotten more nuanced and subtle. Again, hard for me to see because I'm not on the receiving end of it. So I'm curious, can you guys give us a tangible example of how you guys experience racism every day? Just what that's like. Yeah.
I share this story. My first experience with racism when I was approximately 8, maybe 10 years old, I was in elementary school. And in elementary school, I had a teacher that we had a board up on top. And whenever you got an A, you would get a gold star. Whenever you got a B, you'd get, I think, a blue star. And whenever you got a C, I want to say it was a green star. So we had this board up on the wall. I had the most gold stars in the class. I was the smartest person in the class based on this board, right? There was a girl in my class named Susan. And I was teasing her because I had more gold stars than she did. And here's a girl that's probably, like I said, 8 to 10 years old. And she says to me, my mom says that white people are smarter than black people. And just because you have more stars than me doesn't mean you're smarter than me.
Wow.
I'm 10 years old.
Yeah.
Now, she also threw in the N-word, which I just sort of left out. But my point is, at a very early age, I became aware that the color of my skin somehow made me different. But fortunately for me, I had a grandfather who really taught me some powerful lessons about dealing with race. And the most important lesson he taught me was, and he said, look, he said he was a very religious guy. And he said, God never makes mistakes. And he says, if God made you black, he made you black for a reason. And he says, you have to understand that being black is the hand that you were dealt by God. And the key is for you to learn how to play that hand to the best of your ability. He said, never see that hand as a bad hand. As a matter of fact, if God made you black, you are unique. And he's given you some specific ways of dealing with all the stuff you're going to deal with in your life. So just remember that God never makes mistakes. The hand that you were dealt is perfect for you, but you simply have to learn how to play that hand. And it is that lesson that I learned before I was 13 that has allowed me to navigate through a host of racial attacks. I've had a gun pulled to my head simply because I was black. I had a girl that I dated in high school who happened to be white, whose father threatened my life because he didn't want us dating.
Wow.
So I've experienced all of this racial tension, but that lesson that my grandfather taught me allowed me to never in any way feel ashamed of my race or that it was a disadvantage. I've never felt that. And I recognize, unfortunately, that a lot of Black men don't have that mentality. And that's why I write, that's why I speak, that's why I do what I do, to shift the mindset, because I believe that's where it all starts. We have to shift our mindsets, especially as men of color, to recognize that we have to change the inner narrative about ourselves because we know what the media's narrative is. And so that's the goal, is to change the inner narrative.
Cool. Thank you.
So, Michael, I'm really curious to ask you if you don't feel that within yourself, though, do you feel that within society? There's some challenges to your being a Black man.
Absolutely.
So you don't feel bad about it, and so that you're not holding anything. Do you see things from the outside?
Well, I believe in divine purpose, and I believe every human being has a divine purpose. And as I look at all of the chaos in the world, and I see the injustices, and I feel the hurt and the pain and the frustration of Black men around the globe, I feel that in my bones. I feel that. But I recognize that I was given specific gifts and talents. The gift of writing, the gift of communication, the gift of speaking, the gift of optimism. I see all these as gifts. And so what I try to do is share those gifts with other men of color to let them know that despite what's going on outside of us, inside of us, we have access to what I'll call our divinity. And it is in tapping into that aspect of ourselves that we can deal with all the external challenges that show up in our lives.
Yeah, when I hear you share, I kind of think back and I imagine that there are a lot of Black folks that have received similar messages to the ones your grandfather gave you, right? Around, you are unique, you are special, here are your gifts, and you've got to figure out how to apply those gifts. I think that from my perspective, that's a message that I think I've received from my elders throughout my life. And so I agree with you that, I look at my Blackness as a unique attribute of my existence. It's not the sole attribute of my existence for sure, but it is unique. And, kind of going back to Jason's question about experiencing racism, I look at it as, it is a side effect of me walking in this Black skin that, if I go to the store, I may be followed. I may be asked some questions or whatever it is, or I may just get some nasty looks. I mean, I've got a neighbor that I was laughing about yesterday because we're both out doing our yards and gardening, and he says hi to every other neighbor on the block, but won't ever say hi to me, right? And so that's not about me, and that's the work in my mind. So when I experience that racism, kind of the lessons that my elders taught me is that that's not about me, and I've got to be a duck and just let that roll off my back, and the water is not going to affect me, and I've still got to keep moving on. But when you talk about it on a daily basis, it's there. And then the choice I think that I have is whether or not to react or how I react. It's not a whether or not to react, it's how I choose to react. And to me, that's the key.
Yeah. And again, it is frustrating. It is exhausting to deal with all of those nuanced racist attitudes. But again, I always refer back to what my grandfather said. You have to learn how to play the hand that is dealt you. So rather than react negatively, I have no problem confronting racism when I'm exposed to it. But I come from a place of fully understanding and knowing who I am as a human being. But at the same time, also being able to see what's driving some of that negative behavior. It's based on the media's perception that the media has created about us. So I believe understanding breeds compassion. So I'm less likely to overreact and in some cases even sympathize with people who are that ignorant. But at the same time, most importantly for me, it comes from a sense of knowing who I am, what I believe in, what I'm passionate about, what I'm committed to. And I don't let externals dictate anything that happens in my life, because it's not what happens to me that matters. It's how I react to what happens to me that matters. And so being able to stand up for myself, stand up for my race, empower people of all ethnicities, that's where I come from.
Yeah. I'm also aware of sometimes it is important to react. Like right now, like there's a huge uprising of reactivity going on that seems really justified to me. And I wouldn't want to have that not happen in a way, because people have got to, like, if I imagine being black and dealing with the day in and day out, that might reach a boiling point for me. And then you add COVID-19 on top of that, and let's say I just lost my job, or there's just other stressors going on in my marriage, I might react, right? And it's the reaction that I'm paying attention to, right? If everyone was as maybe cool and collected as you, Michael, I'm not saying you don't react, but you seem really grounded in this. If everyone was like you, then we might not actually have change. Maybe. I mean, I'm just curious what you guys think of that. Like, isn't reaction and reactivity right now almost necessary?
It's necessary and mandatory for the world to change. And like I said,
for us to get pissed and hurt,
Yeah, I see the events of today as extremely powerful and positive, because the pain has been so great that something had to shift. And I believe, unlike Rodney King and some previous incidents, this feels different to me, because white people are feeling that pain now. When I think about Colin Kaepernick taking a knee and how he was attacked and vilified for that peaceful protest, but now you have some of the same people who were against what Colin did going, oh shit, now I get it. Mm-hmm. I see why he took that knee. And like I said, I see white people that are going, it's time for us to look at this a little differently. So once again, I see this protesting, which is a form of waking people up, as necessary.
Yeah, John, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that protest or reaction and something is necessary, and it's healthy. I think that, Jason, as you kind of implied, that after a while you have these tensions that build up, you've got to release them. And I think that we're seeing that. And I also think that we're seeing the release of tensions from white folks as well right now. Yeah. It's not just black folks that are expressing what they are feeling and what they're seeing. I think we're seeing it across the board. And it just is the culmination of the events over the last, let's specifically say the last 3-4 years, but even going back longer in history. For me, I'm a black man that was born a month after the riots in Detroit. And so my generation was supposed to be the one where it all got solved and we all kind of came together and figured this out. And it hasn't happened. So for me, it's like this 50-ish years of frustration that is being let out. And so I find it very, cathartic, right? And so for my own mental health, there has to be release. Now, I'm not a looter. I don't do any of that stuff. I went down to the protest in Denver, but that's not my thing. But boy, there's plenty of other ways for me to express myself. And I was able to do that. I was able to do it with my kids. So I think that expression piece is huge, because right now, many people are still trying to navigate and figure out how to even express themselves, right? How do I engage in a constructive dialogue, right? So I'm now talking about next steps, right? Where do we go from here?
Yeah.
But boy, right now, it's just got to be this release. And then we've got to come together and figure out, all right, what are the next steps that we take collectively to address this?
Yeah. And let's remove the looting and the rioting and the negative aspects of it. But I hope, this is my hope, that collectively white people now get a sense of why some of us are so angry. Mm-hmm. We've been doing this since the civil rights movement began, and there's still people that say, I think what happened was when President Obama got elected as president, collectively, white people thought racism was over. I mean, but the truth is, obviously, it was never over. And I love what Will Smith said. He says racism is not getting worse; it's just getting filmed. And so what's happening is now, because of technology, white people get to see what we've been saying since the 50s.
Yeah.
You know, so it's one of those things where my hope is collectively, as mentioned, I believe the American heart just got cracked open in a positive way. And it's painful and it hurts, but it's the beginning of healing, I think. And I believe that we're moving to a new normal.
Okay. Let me ask you guys some questions about, just from the listeners. And the main question that I got in, dozens of questions for folks is, what can white people do? That's sort of the essence of it. There's lots of like nuanced layers to that. And you guys, like what I'm aware of before I have you answer is, there's a way in which I understand as a white man, I can't just keep going to the person of color and saying, what am I supposed to do, right? At a certain point, I need to educate myself. I need to not continue to ask you to do the emotional labor for me and set you up to get burnt out and resentful of the fact that I'm actually not doing the work, and I'm sort of taking a shortcut and just saying, hey, what should I do, guys? And it's the obvious question that a lot of people are asking. We're in a group format. Are you guys cool with that? If I ask that question and open to any pushback, what can white people do right now?
Well, I guess I'll answer that question. But Jason, to me, this is a time where I ask, what do white people want to do? Right? I feel like the ball is in white folks' court. We have shown you, we've exposed it. You're becoming aware. And now the question is what do you want to achieve? What do you want to change? What kind of systems or process or whatever it is in your lives do you want to see changed? And to me, that's a more pertinent question to the resolution. Mm-hmm. Now, if you ask me kind of what do I think you should do, I'll give you the basic stuff. I mean, you've got to do your reading, right? You've got to get educated to understand the history of racism. You've got to understand the history of the United States and what's going on here, of police violence, and of the systems and institutions that have challenged our success and our ability to thrive, not just as Black folks, but as a collective society. You've got to do the education. I think the other piece is you've got to get some folks that don't look like you into your circle, into your network. You've got to figure out, how do I diversify the people that I come in contact on a regular basis? Because I think the largest challenge that we face is just we don't understand each other. We don't get each other. And, I was telling somebody the other day, I might see you on the street and I think you're a little suspect, but boy, usually, once I sit down and I talk to you, I get it. I get a connection. We may not be best friends, but there is a connection and I see you as a human. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a piece that we haven't actively pursued. And so one of the avenues that I've been recommending to people lately to kind of address that is get involved in some community organization, right? So there's plenty of community resource centers in every town, every area. Get involved and see what you can do, because that provides access and exposure, I think, to a lot of folks that you may not usually come across. And I think it's also where we can really apply and teach other people skills. And so to me, I look to say, people, turn to your local community and figure out how you can get involved. It's not necessarily some big national platform that we all have to pursue at the same time.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, listener, there's a ton of tips there. And I love that first tip of coming back and asking ourselves, how do we want to show up here? Yep, awesome.
Yeah, and here's a simple exercise for white people. Takes rigorous honesty, vulnerability. Simply get a piece of paper, and on the top of that piece of paper, simply write, Black people are. And free form it. Don't think about it. Just think about the first thing that comes to mind on that piece of paper. Black people are, and just start writing. Be honest. What comes up for you? What is there? Because all that subconscious stuff that you've picked up from the media, from your family, it's all in your subconscious. So you got to be willing to look at, what are your beliefs about Black people? And if you'll be honest with yourself and start with just pulling up the unconscious beliefs that you have, then you have an opportunity to say, well, maybe I need to rethink that. Maybe I need to see that a little differently. But it takes rigorous honesty to do this. But if you be honest with yourself and don't feel guilty about whatever comes up, just be honest with yourself. What are the deeply held subconscious beliefs and biases that you have about Black people? Be honest.
Yeah.
And see what comes up.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, Michael, I really like that. You talk about not feeling guilty about that. I say that a lot too, is that, there should be, reduce the fear and don't feel guilty. You're going to get it wrong. I'm going to get it wrong. We're going to get it wrong. But that's my biggest concern right now, is that people are fearful to speak. Right. And so, as a Black man, it's not going to shock me to hear the things on your list. I don't think. Right. I really don't. I think that I'm aware enough that doesn't shock me. I don't even have to see your list, to be honest with you. But when people go, right. But when people when they go through that exercise, I think that, I'm with you, that's the work. Right. And that's where like the eye opening can happen. And then you've got to say, man, what do I do with this? How do I look at this and understand whether or not the perspectives and the beliefs that I have are true? Are they accurate? Right. Yeah. Because I think that's what we're getting at is that we've got to still fight a bunch of beliefs that people have about other races, ethnicities, whatever, that aren't grounded in fact.
Yeah.
And so the only way to get that is personal experience. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. And, another thing to think about, as human beings, we have this thing that we always want to meet other people's approvals. And, we do a lot of things based on that idea that we're worried about what other people think. So my invitation to you as a white person, as you watch this, ask yourself honestly, if you have children, how would you feel if your child dated someone of another race? How would you feel? Honestly, my daughter is 33. And when she was about 19, she came up to me and she said, Dad, how would you feel if I dated a white guy? And I said, baby, look, I only have 2 requirements for somebody that you date. And it has nothing to do with race. First of all, that they love you as much as I do. Secondly, they don't do anything to hurt you. Other than that, I don't care who you date. So the question becomes, if we were really honest with ourselves, if we have issues with our children dating someone of another race, why is that? It's because of those beliefs that I mentioned earlier that we need to pull up so that we can change those subconscious negative beliefs that we have about people who don't look like us.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. I feel like there's just want to get your opinion on something else. Obviously, a lot of brainwashing going on here with racism in terms of how we raise children, what we teach them through our behavior, our daily actions, mostly, certainly what we say. I am really curious. Back to my question around the roots of racism, slavery, is I can kind of, the little I've read about, it's like, okay, agriculture came along and then we owned land and now we can have people work for us and here hence slavery starts. But it seems like there's this very old pattern in human history where we judge each other based on our skin color, and then we think white is better than. And then we create systems, land ownership or people ownership around that. And I keep asking the question, why? And I am curious if there's like just a scholarly sort of article I could read that's like, yeah, actually this is the program and this is about skin color more than anything else. Do you guys have thoughts on that? Like, and to me, I just think of the absurdity of that skin color, sort of just that primary judgment that I'm better than you somehow, and how deep that is in especially white people because it's gone on so long. The reason I'm curious is because that helps me tackle the problem on my side, right?
Well, for me, I believe it's important to understand history, as you just mentioned, getting to the root cause of some of the beliefs and ideas and this whole idea of white supremacy, so deeply ingrained in the consciousness of a collective that's primarily white.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I believe it's even more important to realize that it is just history. There are systems that have been put in place that have always showcased Black people as less than. You know, we had experts that tried to prove Black people had smaller brains and we were less intelligent. I mean, and there's all that deeply ingrained white supremacy.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know if going backwards is going to shift it. Recognize and acknowledge the systems which we know, for example, the judicial system, you know, the prison complexes, those are all systems that have at their core some issues of white supremacy. But at the same time, to break free from that, it's about what's happening right now and what's happening next. Mm-hmm. And so what's happening next is what we're doing right now, Jason. Having a conversation with white people, hopefully to open their minds to seeing the world a little differently and to realize that the protests and everything we've been doing, we're doing the same thing we've been doing for 60 years. We've simply been saying we're equal. And that's all we're asking for, to see us as equal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, Jason, in terms of the history, I'm kind of with Michael where, I think there's plenty of books. I think, Dr. Kendi, his Stamped from the Beginning is a great resource if you're trying to understand the history and how we kind of got here. And I guess, again, I turn that question around and I say, in your life, Jason or any white person, how were you indoctrinated and how were you taught these lessons? Right. So it's one thing that it's been within systems and, and whether it's systemic or institutional, but there's also a piece that I think we've been talking about, which is on a very personal level. Right. So how is racism taught at home, or how is anti-racism not taught at home?
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's part of it is that in a household, if you're not doing that anti-racist work, then you are at best perpetuating racism.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Right. And so to me, that's the question. And that's the question that I ask a lot of my white friends during these times when they reach out, which is, hey, John, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And I say, how are you doing? What are you doing?
Right.
Right. Because I've been in this boat for my entire life.
Yeah.
These incidents don't surprise me. They're not shocking. George Floyd is just another one. Right. And but clearly it has done something, as Michael said, it cracked open the hearts of our society. And so that's where my curiosity is around people that are just having their hearts cracked open. What is this for you? What does it feel like? What are you feeling? And what do you feel like needs to change? Or do you feel like anything needs to change? Or is this just I need to get a good cry out and then go back to normal? Mm-hmm. That's where my curiosity as a Black man and somebody that wants to see us as a society get better, that's where my curiosity lies, really.
Yeah, great.
And also the real question is for white people is, okay, so you're in your work environment, there's no Black people there, there's only white people, and they're telling racist jokes, and are you participating in that? Are you allowing those types of conversations? Are you engaging in those types of conversations with your peers? I mean, if you really want to talk about changing, then you have to speak up and say, hey, look, that doesn't align with my beliefs. And if nothing else, don't participate, but be real about in those environments. Are you fostering, are perpetuating the illusions that we're trying to get past in those conversations with only white people?
Yeah. I mean, are you participating just by being a silent observer?
Yeah.
My quick personal experience is that I got a couple of these, but I've been in a space where someone said something really nasty racist to me. in a workplace, professional workplace, called it out. And then kind of what happened was that the other 13 white folks in the room all said, hey, let's just let it go. Let's just forget about it. Let's not deal with it, right? Just let it go under the bridge. And that's the challenge, right? Is that's where we've got to stop, right? We've got to say, no, we've got to deal with this, right? In this moment, because the problems that we have is that we just want to look at each one of these as a one-off, right? Oh, this is just a one-off of someone being a little bit not great, but whatever. And that really, I think, as we're starting to see, as people have videotapes and you're starting to hear about other folks' histories, that it's pervasive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's everywhere.
Right. And that the folks that are doing bad are consistently doing bad, or at least treating people poorly. And so to me, that's where we've got to talk about intervention. It's not just sitting back and listening in the water cooler and, well, I didn't say and I didn't throw a joke in. Well, you sat there and didn't stop it.
Right.
And I think that's where the work is.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about silence for a minute. Just to frame this, Weeze, who I interviewed yesterday, who's, hardcore activist here right now. I can't remember if you've met her, John, or not.
I think remember. Email.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, she had an interesting frame for us white people, which was, look, right now she's kind of a metaphor of like the stage or a play. And there's this play going on, this performance, this show, and black people are on the stage. And white people need to let black people have the stage, and we need to support, right? Be the support staff, basically. What can I get you? The marketing, the selling tickets, she had this really interesting way of framing it, and I wanted to, I'm trying to try that on, and I like it on some level, because it's like, yes, people sharing their Instagram feeds, for example, kind of muting them and sharing black voices to get the word out, right? To just really say, let's let black people actually speak right now. White people have had the mic forever. So if we do that, like if white people are like, oh, okay, cool, I got to let black people have the stage, then my fear with some white people is we're going to interpret that as to be silent, right? Like, how do we reconcile this? Like, yeah, I want as many black voices to address this, and yet I want to be involved, but I don't want to pretend like I know what the hell I'm talking about here. So how do we reconcile this?
Well, I think of your stage metaphor, and I think, I watch a performance, right? I absorb it, I take it in, and then I go home and I talk to my friends about it. Right. And I tell them what I experienced, what I saw. This is a great play. You got to go see it. And to me, that's the work, right? Which is once you leave that play and you're there and you're supporting, you're helping selling tickets, but are you going home and promoting the play and telling other folks what you did? Mm-hmm. Right. Because that's where the education is, right? Oh, I went and saw this and I shared that experience. It's not that Michael or I have to be in the same space with you while you do the work. Right. Black folks don't have to be there for progress to be made. And so I think that you can use your voice to start talking to your community, to your neighbors, to your relatives, right? There's a lot more opportunity, I think, for white folks to have these conversations without black people being in the room than they realize. Yeah. That they can have these conversations and they can let it get really ugly and they don't have to be perfect. And it seems like the perfect playground for me to work on your kind of communication skills there. So I like that metaphor, and I like the idea of a play and being supported. And yeah, I don't want to say stop going to the play, but boy, you got to go and talk about things after the play's over. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that metaphor also. But, in my book, Shattering Black Male Stereotypes, I list what I call the 10 most destructive media-generated illusions about Black men. And I had a woman write a review who happened to be white, and she happened to be married to a Black guy. And she says, after reading your book, what I recognized was I still had stereotypes about Black men, even though I was married to one. So it's really important to, once again, check our unconscious beliefs and filters through which we see Black men, because until you do that, nothing really changes.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Wow. Cool. This is helpful, guys. I got a few questions from listeners I'd love to just throw out at you. And let's see. And if, again, feel free to nix any of them. Yeah, so Bob says, how to effectively call forward, give feedback, and have challenging conversations that break white solidarity and embrace a structural analysis of racism and white supremacy.
Well, I'm a huge advocate of men's groups. There's an amazing thing that happens when we create a safe enough space for people to get real with what's really, really going on. And it's not surfacey stuff. It's really heart-centered. This is what's true for me. So finding environments in which you can engage in these types of conversations and get feedback. And obviously you would want that environment to have people of other cultures and colors to give you the feedback on your deepest held beliefs about what you think about them. But it's transformative when we allow ourselves to come together in a container in which everyone gets to be heard without judgment, without criticism, but just the openness and understanding to see their point of view and possibly give us another way to see that maybe our point of view isn't the right point of view.
Yeah. Yeah. Safe environments, totally.
Yeah, and I'll just second that. I'm also a big believer in men's groups, and I think that the growth that can come, that comes for me personally, as well as the other men in my group, and I'll say, based on where I live, I'm the only minority, I'm the only Black person in my men's group, right? And so it's always very interesting for me and for the rest of the men in the group, I think, when stuff like this comes up and we have these conversations and we get deep, and one, I get to express myself, right? And so I can express myself and let out a lot of the stuff that I'm holding in front of a group of white men, which I usually wouldn't be able to do without fear or concern. And so it's a safe space for me to practice in a way. And it's also a safe space for them. And so I'm with you on the whole men's group or whatever it is, whether it's, there's a series called the Living Room Conversations, which they have a series on different topics, but one of them is on race and equity and inclusion, I think. And that's another great resource, for this gentleman that asked the question, like, what can I do? Like, have a living room conversation with your friends. It's very similar to a men's group, but I think that small group work like that is really helpful.
Yeah.
To getting to the root.
Yeah. Getting honest, getting it all out.
And not to self-promote, but if you look at the 10 illusions in my book, you want to talk about some powerful fuel for contemplation for white people. It's really powerful to say, look, let's talk about these illusions and see, are these stereotypes that have been perpetuated forever, and see if we need to shift our perception about Black men. It's again, the group setting is really the foundation of true transformation. And so just engaging in those conversations, as John mentioned, where you have the opportunity to just be real and go deep and talk about those things. And it's really about bringing to the surface unconscious, subconscious beliefs that we have. And the only way to change is to recognize them so that you can change them.
Yeah.
So Jason, I want to jump to John with something unique to Black men. Because John, you mentioned that you're the only person of color in your group. And when I participated in a program called the New Warrior Training Adventure, which is a 3-day weekend specifically for men. And on that weekend, I was the only person of color, not only participating, but the staff and everything. I was the only Black person there. That's never been an issue for me. I've always been self-confident, and I just was there to grow. But I know that one of the challenges that we as men of color have to deal with is that sometimes we are rejected from our own group because we choose to do things, quote unquote, that white people do. So John, I'm curious, from a Black male perspective, how you and I'm assuming also Colorado doesn't have a lot of black people anyway, right?
No.
It's Boulder. Yeah.
Oh, that was a good one.
But I'm just curious, John, your perspective and thoughts on being in that environment and how you deal with that.
Well, I should preface my response, or I should say that I have been the only black man, the only black person, whatever, in most of the spaces I've existed in since my family moved from Detroit, Michigan to Ann Arbor, Michigan when I was 7, 8, right? And so from that point forward, I've always been the one black guy, the one whatever. And so I think that over time, I've learned how to function in that role, right? And so it's not terribly uncomfortable at all for me to walk into, like you're saying, like, you know, into a men's group weekend or retreat and be the only black guy. I'm not surprised by it. I don't even bother asking anymore, right? I mean, you know, I'm going to be the only guy. I'm ready. Let's go, right? And I thankfully, just because of my years, I think that I've got to the point where I can share my stuff around race, even if no one else in that space wants to have that conversation. I can bring it up and say, this is my reality, because it is. And so, you know, Michael, I think your question then to me turns a little bit to, man, how do I deal with that? To, you know, I'm going to keep flipping it, but I'm, you know, like, how do other people deal with it? Some of them, I know when I go into these spaces, some of them shut down, right? Or just aren't there, if that's where we're going in that space. But I think that anyone that chooses to live an integrated life, that's the way I'm going to talk about my life, is integrated. And because I float between white spaces and black spaces and all kinds of spaces, is that you got to get real comfortable with yourself, right? And with the confidence that you have about being in spaces. And most importantly for me, I've realized over my life, is realizing the need for me to be in spaces. There are some spaces that I show up to where I just need to be there, where they need me to be there. And so I have that right to be in that space as well. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's been really important for me, just to say, yeah, I'm here and I'm going to do the work as a black man, as a man. And so I don't know, Michael, I think that I get what you're saying, because I think that there are many other spaces, especially black focused spaces, where that is a challenge, right? Where you're going off and you're doing, wherever you want to say, the white folks work or doing that. I don't look at it that way.
Yeah. Because interestingly enough, I see myself as a representative for black people. So when I show up in those spaces, what I know is that if I'm being authentically who I am, I have literally shifted people's belief systems about black people because of who I am. Because it's their first experience of having someone that, number one, is willing to go deep. But I've also had where I've had white male friends who say, well, you're not really black, because of my willingness to be in white spaces. And I know I don't want to say I've struggled with it, but I actually wrote an entire book called The Cure for Onlyness, A Black Man's Guide to Joy, Passion, and Purpose. And I talk about the challenges that we as black men have navigating both spaces and actually being comfortable in both spaces. But it's something that is probably difficult, Jason, for maybe you to wrap your head around. But I bring that up to say that as black men, that's just another layer of complexity, right, that we have to deal with on a regular basis.
Yeah, I'm just aware of how cool it is to have two of you that have that flexibility, that agility to move between groups, and how unique maybe that is. Maybe it's not, but it seems, I don't know, just seems kind of cool that there's a connection here between the two of you about that, if I'm getting that right.
Yeah, I think it's a survival trait, instinct, right? You know, is that, well, you know, let's be honest. If you want to succeed in the white world, then you've got to be able to do that. It's a requirement. And I'm not going to mince words about that. You have to know how to code switch. You can't get by without code switching in this world. Now, do I wish that weren't true? Sure, but it's not. So I've got to be able to show up, and I'm with Michael, right? I've got to be able to show up, and I'm going to show up with my crap, just like, white guys in the men's group are going to show up with their crap. And if my crap is largely around race, well, tough. That's my truth, right? And I think that, that's the piece that sometimes is painful for folks, right? Because even in men's group where you're supposed to grow deep, some folks don't want to go there, right?
It's confronting.
I don't know. Maybe it brings up their own stuff.
Yeah.
That's something I'm really curious about, especially, all the men's work that I've done over the years. It sounds like probably between the three of us, we've done a lot. And that's something that I have seen in those spaces.
Yeah. Is people not wanting to go there? There's just a fear block of some kind, right?
Right. But they'll tackle any other issue.
Totally.
They will tackle any other issue I've been to men's group where guys, within 2 minutes of sharing, they are deep, deep, deep into trouble. And so it's always surprised me how they are willing to go deep in some areas, but this is one that just, they just don't feel comfortable. And that's something I'm always curious about. Like, what is it about that where you have no fear in many other areas of your life and you're willing to push yourself and run 100 miles in 2 days and, whatever. But man, it's too much for them.
Yeah. I mean, I could take a stab at it because I feel like I've been there, for myself. And the men I've worked with is fear, right? I'm scared. I'm scared I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm scared I'm going to do the wrong thing, or I've got unconscious racism going on. And I'm actually in judgment, I was taught and trained something, and now you're showing up and you're confronting that belief, and I'm over here stuck and don't know what to do. These are just, but largely I would say fear, fear of fucking it up, and then also this racism, layer. Just a guess. I don't know, John. Yeah.
No, it feels right. I think the fear thing is very real.
Yeah, but how powerful is it when we can just say, hey, I'm scared. I have some biases over here, or I have some blocks. Can we hang with this and explore this right now together? Sort of like you were talking about earlier, Michael.
Well, in the right context, the right space, that can be a really healing growth moment, to just be willing to go there. That's where transformation occurs. But creating a space where the fear can be set to the side and just feel it and move through it, that's where change comes from.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think knowing what I know now, I would certainly facilitate men's groups differently. Back then, I'm not facilitating any currently. Given my level of awareness has expanded, so I'm sure that I've been on the giving end of blocking black men from going, deeper, and white men dealing with their stuff around a black man being in the group, for example. I guarantee I've blocked that as a facilitator. Yeah, it's.
And I just want to say thanks for owning that. I do appreciate that, because I think that that's a part of our collective healing journey. Yeah,
totally. I mean, this whole. Again, to sort of use your words, Michael, that kind of cracked open the heart of the society that's been helpful for me is I just continue to look at the ways in which I'm stuck here, where I'm unsure, where I'm afraid, where I get frozen. So this is, good for me it's healing for me to just keep having these conversations and asking these questions. So I'm just digging you guys for that right now.
Jason, can I ask you about that frozen feeling? Is it that is the frozenness around action?
Mostly around action. I don't know what to do. What? And then the overwhelm of just my own life, right? Of I've got so much going on, and then not wanting to be. It's like if I don't take action, I'm in silence and I'm a bystander. If I do take action, I'm going to fuck it up. So I'll just stay here frozen. So I sort of see it as like a double bind. I'm not saying that's actually true over here, but when I get frozen, that's what starts to happen. I'm fucked either way. So I'll just stay stuck where I am. And this is what people do in their lives, right? If they perceive it as two bad choices, they're going to stay frozen and stuck.
Yeah. Wow.
And I'm trying to, I am pushing myself to fumble through these conversations, and just because it feels so much better than silence to me.
Yeah, and that sounds very similar to the way that I would manage, or you would suggest people manage any relationship, right?
Totally.
Instead of sitting in silence, we got to work through this.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we're gonna make mistakes. There's no way to get to repair and like a good connection without fumbling our way through it, without maybe hurting feelings and getting feelings hurt and stepping in the wrong direction and like, oh, oops, okay. But if we can stay in relationship, we're going to get there, especially if we have some tools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the key. The tools, gaining the tools of awareness. That's what shifts everything.
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah. Yeah. Without awareness, right? I mean, you can't attain knowledge. You can't build skill. So I'm with you. And when I look at those three, it's awareness has to come first, right? And you get the awareness, then you can build, you can get the knowledge, you can start to find the people that you can go to as a resource, right? So, hey, if I've got some issues around, blacks and race and whatever, I've got this person in my pocket. And if I've got something, around age, and I've got this person. And so you've got to have all the tools to help you navigate this. And so I feel sorry for folks that don't have access to some of these tools that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. Because I recognize that to solve the challenges that we're here talking about, there are folks in this country, and a lot of them in Colorado, because, 2% of the population is black, where it's hard for them to find other people to engage with. But you got to figure out a way to do it, whether it's online or some other resource, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Let me ask you a few more questions here. Christina is asking, is there a way to apologize to our people of color friends and coworkers for our obliviousness to privilege and the impact it's had on them without making it about us? Because I know this is a thing I've been learning, and it even happens with my wife sometimes, where, I'm so sorry about my behavior, but now it's all about me and my process, right? And I'm back to white centering in a way.
Well, I think when you start talking about apologies, I don't think white people have to apologize for what their ancestors did. What did you do? How have you impacted the perpetuation of racism? And standing in that place, do you owe anyone an apology for something you have done? So again, I don't look at it from the collective, but from an individual standpoint. So if you want to apologize, then go to someone that you have hurt, or someone where you have done something that perpetuated racism, and heal that. That's the only apology I see as necessary.
Yeah, I agree with you. I 100% agree with you. I don't feel a sense to get a apology for historical challenges and racism and what your grandparents and grandparents might have done. Like, that doesn't do much for me. But I'm with you, Michael, on, hey, are there some rights, or is there some way that where, you realize that you didn't support me in a way that you could have or wanted to, right? To me, that's a much more effective and a much more genuine apology. A generic apology for past wrongs, it doesn't do much.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. That's, and so Jason, I'm sure you go back to just the core of conflict management and conflict resolution, right? And you gotta.
Yeah. Taking ownership.
The harm that's in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Cool. Couple more here. Karen says, I have been in an interracial relationship. While I never considered myself a racist, I'm starting to see how my white privilege played a role in our dynamic, however subtle or unconscious. What common issues in interracial relationships do you recognize, and do you have any advice on how to counter or repair those? That's part one. Part two is, as a white mother of a mixed race child, what can I do to prepare my son for racism that he will probably face at some point? What kind of conversations should we have, et cetera?
Well, I think, like I said, from my grandfather's perspective, the best thing he did was gave me confidence in myself as a human being. He didn't, he never taught me to feel like a victim. He always told me that I was responsible for everything. Or he taught me that I was responsible for my life turning out the way that I wanted to, and no one or nothing outside of me could impact that. So from that perspective, the best thing I think any parent can do is to simply love their child unconditionally. Let them know that you love them for who they are. And yes, there are going to be challenges out there, but when we instill that sense of confidence and love and support in that child, then they have that foundation of knowing who they are. And it is in knowing who we are that gives us the confidence to navigate the world and what's going outside of it. In terms of interracial relationships, we say interracial relationships, but relationships are about the heart. And really being able to open our hearts and to be vulnerable and to connect intimately really has nothing to do with the color of our skin. So the question becomes, are you opening your heart? Are you able to create true, deep intimacy in your relationship with the person that you're with? Because the race piece is external. The connection piece is internal. So whether you're dating someone of the same race or not, it's the heart that connects. And so if you have that connection, then race should not play a part in it, in my experience.
Cool. John?
Yeah, I guess, my experience is I was married to a white woman for a number of years, and we have kids together. So my experience is that we each have our own capacities, right? And so my capacity to handle a conversation around race is different than my partner's, potentially, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where I think you have to be really aware, which is like, how far can each party go in this conversation? And then you have to decide whether or not that's comfortable, right? So your love, and Michael talks about this connection. Well, if you've got something that's blocking you from extending that connection and being able to talk about race and being able to do that, I think it can be a challenge. It certainly can be a challenge in a relationship. And so I encourage folks, and especially people that are in interracial relationships, to really go and do some therapy, right? And make sure that you know how to communicate, you know how to resolve challenges and differences that come up. Because I think that my experience is that I experienced something that I perceived to be racially charged. My white partner may not have seen that, right? And so how much do I explain? How much do I bring up? I think that's a question that frequently came up in my mind, for me personally. And then when I started thinking about the lessons I needed to teach my kids, I mean, I moved to Colorado. I knew it wasn't a very diverse place. So I had to start making conscious choices about how I would educate my kids, right? So do I regularly go down to Denver and we go into the Black neighborhood and do things on the weekend? Do we regularly take vacations where I can make sure I expose them, whatever that is? And right now, I split time with my kids between my ex and my house. I make sure that when they're with me, that we have those conversations, right? The conversations that she may not be able or want to have. I make sure that we have those conversations. So I would encourage this woman to kind of do the same. If she's not able to have the conversations, find Black folks or other folks in your life that you can expose your kid to that will have those conversations with them. Mm-hmm. Because I think that's key when you're trying to raise an interracial kid, that you make sure they're exposed to everything you can in terms of races and people that support their history.
Yeah.
And understand it.
Yeah, cool. We're going to start winding down, guys. I do want to get your take on the police brutality and how the media, sort of to your point, Michael, might spin things and might even actually plant people to instigate riots that actually aren't Black people, and then put BLM, Black Lives Matter, or whatever, on a burning car as a way to frame Black people. I'm just curious is this actually going on, in your opinion? And like, what can we do about that? It feels really, really hard to look at. And I want to look at it and be like, this is super fucked up if this is, occurring. I'm sure it is. I mean, there's just so much bullshit going on there. But I'm wondering to what extent and what can we do about that?
Yeah. Well,
Go ahead, John.
no, I'm going to let you take this one.
Well, for me, I don't watch the news. I'll read, what's going on in the world. I'll see it. I'm obviously aware of it. But again, my perception and belief is that the media's job is to showcase everything that is wrong. And it focuses on, the riots and the looting and so forth. But that's the very small percentage of it. The overwhelming majority of these protests, in my opinion, has been really positive because society is waking up. And so we have some issues within our police department that need to be addressed without question. But the larger question is, how do we stop this? The way the media frames Black men, for example, right now, with all the pain that we're experiencing as a result of, Mr. Floyd's death and everything, there's this insidious victimization that Black men experience. And here's a perfect example. In 1995, I was in a restaurant and there were these two Black guys having a conversation. One of the most depressing conversations I've ever had. And they were talking about the eradication of Black men from society. And so I listened to their conversation for a moment and I walked over to their table. I apologized for eavesdropping and I said, man, please tell me you don't believe what you just said. Now, these were two apparently well-educated, well-spoken, affluent Black guys. And the guy looks at me and he says, absolutely, I believe what I said. He says, I believe in 20 years, all Black men are either going to be dead or in jail. Okay? And it wasn't what he said that broke my heart as much as how he said it. He was I could just sense the powerlessness he felt, that he had no control over his life. And so that belief system, that narrative is the result of the media constantly bombarding us with the images of, Black men being an endangered species and all this, high incarceration. And so there's this mindset, unfortunately, that too many Black men have accepted that our fate is so bleak. And so that's why I do what I do. I try to introduce Black men to a different narrative because what we're seeing in the media is such a small portion of who we are. But yet that's where I believe the biggest change needs to occur. The media needs to do a more fair job of showcasing. When you talk about riots and they show Black people only, well, there's white people rioting too. And then when you have the president of the United States calling people thugs, we know who he was pointing to. Right. But the same people, when they're walking around with rifles and stuff instead of the front of the state capitol, they're fine people. So this media-generated narrative about Black men, I say I can't change that, but I can change Black men's minds to understand that the media is giving them a very small glimpse of who we are. And I think that's where we as Black men have to start. So I just turn off the TV and don't pay attention to it.
Yeah, and then you're working on the individual level too to really transform Black men's lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, Michael, I'm with you too. Like I don't watch TV, and I'll kind of maybe check out a news feed or something every now and then to see what's going on. But I don't need that to do my work, right? Necessarily. But as somebody, I used to be the chairman of a local radio station, and for me, I look at their reports as well as other stations with a critical, and I listen with a critical ear. And I heard a story this morning where the lead was, protesters were hoping for peace. at the demonstrations today or tonight. The lead really should have been protesters continue to show up to demand their rights.
Right.
Right. And so it's little things like that in the way that we listen to and perceive these stories. Right. And so you could walk away hearing that, thinking that the Black folks are just hoping others don't show up and protest and riot and loot. And I don't think that that's their primary concern. Their primary concern is the demands and the requests that they have. And I think then I look to media and I say, media dropped the ball here, right? They're telling you the wrong story or a story that isn't relevant, right? It's secondary. And so I go back to what I think Michael said at the very beginning, which is that we love to consume violence. Yeah. Right. And especially if it's violence that's committed by people that don't look like me.
Right.
And I think that that's the challenge that we face here is that, one, we don't have critical ears or eyes. Mm-hmm. And then secondarily, to Michael's point, we're enamored with violence.
Yeah.
I get Google alerts. I put in keywords, Black man, African-American man, and things like that. And it blows me away, the negative stories that come through that feed in terms of Black men.
Wow,
and
yeah.
Again, it's the reason why those Black men felt so powerless, because they're constantly bombarded with these stories. And so we have to learn discernment. We have to learn to turn off the media and really do our own inner work. And it frustrates me to no end that, number one, Black men feel so victimized, but I understand why they feel that way. Mm-hmm. It's just like, it's so frustrating. And so that's why I've created my platforms to try to counteract that negative narrative.
Yeah. Yeah. And thanks for doing that. Wow. This has been super powerful, guys. I'm going to have you each leave with a thought here for us. And I want to reflect something I really got here. Many things, but one thing you said, John, about when it's like, hey, what should we do, guys? Hey, Black guys, what should white guy do here? Instead of turning that around and saying, yeah, well, what do I want to do? And what am I going to do? And I notice that's what's happening over here as I come out of sort of freeze, as I start to mobilize into, yeah, what do I want to do? How do I want to show up here that feels good to me and doable? Without any shoulds from anybody else, especially white people telling me what I should do right now. And that's just a good reminder I wanted to sort of reflect as we wind down here is for, again, and knowing that not every listener here is white, but for those white listeners and really all of us, it's like, what do I want to do right now? And what am I going to do? So thanks for that reminder. Yeah. So guys, how do you, just leave us with your parting thoughts here as we close today. Whatever you want to say would be great.
Well, I'm going to close with simple. Be optimistic. There are a lot of challenges out there. Oh, my gosh. But in my short lifetime, I'll be 60 this year, by the way. In my short lifetime, I've seen this country go from not allowing Black people to vote to choosing a Black president. Now, when I say that, people go, but what about all the other stuff? Well, all the other stuff is there. But to me, you're talking about a human species that's 250,000 years old, but they're still evolving. So I say we're a young species and we're waking up. So I say be optimistic because human beings are still evolving and we're evolving in consciousness. And there's a lot more things that are right with the world than are wrong with it. And simply, I choose to focus on what's right.
Cool. Love your optimism. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you. Yeah. I guess for me, I kind of walk away, and my thought is to everyone, choose the work that you want to do and then pursue that work, right? And that understanding, because I think that this is a time for us to really to come together. And I think there's a lot of openness that we have. And so it's a good time to connect. And so I walk away encouraging folks to connect with one another and have these hard conversations, because I don't think it's going to get any easier as we go down the road. So mine is go out there, have the conversations and do the hard work, because the rewards are for our kids. That's the biggest thing in my mind that I always go back to is, how am I going to make this better for my kids? Or now I'm at the point where how am I going to make it better for my grandkids? And I like that mental framing for me to make sure I stay on point.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, John. Where can people find you guys? Are you open to people reaching out? Where should they reach out if they do?
Yeah, I would say go to shatteringblackmalestereotypes.com. If you want to see a powerful, positive resource for Black men and you want to direct them to something that inspires and motivates them to reach their fullest potential, and you want to see another side of Black guys that we're really here about transforming ourselves and doing some wonderful things, shatteringblackmalestereotypes.com is the place to go, and you can connect with me there.
Cool. Thanks, Michael.
Nice. And people want to get in touch with me, they can certainly, find me. I have a website. It's Jon T. Walton, Jon John, that people can check out and kind of find out a little bit more about me. I'm on LinkedIn and also on Twitter. So if you want, please reach out. I'm certainly open to the conversation. I think this is the time for us as a collective to have these conversations. I'm more than willing to facilitate that for folks.
Okay. Amazing. Cool. Thanks, guys. Great to see you both again.
Thank you, Jason.
Wait, before we go,
Yep.
Jason, thank you, my brother, for reaching out and being courageous enough to engage in this conversation. Because, yes, that's what white people can do. Engage in these conversations. So I appreciate you.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Great use of your platform, Jason. Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, thanks for the nudge, too, on that, John. All right, guys, go check out Michael Taylor, shatteringblackmalestereotypes.com, and Jon Walton at jontwalton.com. Like I said, John has been really instrumental in our business, helping educate and train us about equity, race, diversity, equality in the workplace, and how we can kind of ripple that outward to our students and the world. So really grateful for these guys, two, pretty different vibes and really fun to connect with them. I just really enjoy these guys. And under the circumstances, it's obviously super intense. So learning over here. Okay, action step. Gosh, there's many. The other day on my Facebook page, I shared a article. And again, I'm directing this towards white folks, although you might not be white listening. If you're Black, you don't need me to tell you what to do. But I feel like I need to help my white friends and listeners. And I shared an article called 75 Things White People Can Do for Racial Justice. Okay, and I'll put that in the show notes. All right. 75 things white people can do for racial justice. Read that. All right, I'm just going to direct you to one place. Instead of listing 75 things or 10 things or 2 people to follow, I'm just saying, read this blog post. And actually, before you share it, read it. And take action on one item in the entire list of 75. I mean, this woman put together a huge list. There's everything from, what movies to watch, what books to read, what businesses to boycott. It's extensive. How you can get involved in your local government. Yeah, it's very, very helpful. Okay. So we'll put that in the show notes. If for some reason you don't get to our show notes, just Google 75 things white people can do for racial justice. It's on medium.com. Okay. The author's name is Kareen Shutak. Kareen Shutak. She wrote this clear back in August, but she says she updates it continually. August of 2017. So this is good. Yeah, I think you're going to like it. Okay, thanks, guys. Hopefully this is helpful. If you have anyone else you think I should interview, certainly let us know. Particularly on race, right? This is the hot topic right now, and it's the conversation I'm in my head all day long. Okay, and again, here's to standing up for Black people right now. All right, take good care today. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Share one of these videos with a friend. We want to help the planet get their act together around relationships, and you are one of them, so thank you.